Brexit's effect on UK has caused former members of the parliament to move to Mississippi. Okay, I'm just kidding. I just made that one up right there. I just thought it was appropriate.
Some people would say that was a Brexit bonus.
So economic impact. The UK's economy continues to adapt post-Brexit. As of 2023, the Office for Budget Responsibility, OBR, maintains that Brexit will reduce UK's GDP by 4% in the long term compared to remaining in the EU. In 2022, UK exports to the EU partially recovered but remained 10% lower than 2019 levels, while imports from EU were still down 15%. I'll read the next one. Trade relations. Trade with the EU accounted for 42% of UK's exports and 50% of imports in 2022. The additional administrative burdens continue to cost UK businesses an estimated $7.5 billion annually due to custom checks and paperwork. Immigration policy. Net EU migration saw a shift in 2022. Net migration reached 504,000, a record high, but this was driven largely by non-EU migrants. Net migration from the EU remained low, contributing to labor shortages in sectors like hospitality and agriculture. Okay. So I'll pause right there. What has been a net positive and net negative ever since Brexit took place?
Britain formally left in 2020.
Right.
Now, you'll remember that shortly after that, there was this global event that happened called COVID lockdowns.
Yes.
This makes it really quite difficult to look at the impact simply because we literally shut down about 25% of output. COVID was very disruptive to supply chains. How much of the changes to supply chains are caused by the COVID lockdowns? How much by Brexit? I think as we start to move away from the COVID lockdowns, we get a fairer picture. And I think the picture is something like this. Leaving the European Union means that Britain has been able to increase exports. British exports are higher now than ever. British exports to Europe are higher now than ever. Europe has not done terribly well since 2016 when Britain voted to leave the EU. But Britain has been amongst the fastest European economies since leaving the European Union. But that's not really saying much. But when people say that Brexit has harmed Britain, well, it seems to have done. If you're comparing growth rates, we've outperformed most European countries. But all that said, I still think we haven't taken full advantage of it. When the United States became independent, you beat the Brits at Yorktown, right? You very wisely got a whole bunch of really clever people. You put them in a courthouse in Philadelphia, and you got them to come up with a system of self-government, the Constitution, and it worked wonderfully. Imagine if instead of doing that, the Americans had put that Chancellor Aaron Burr in charge. That's what Britain has basically done. Since voting to leave the European Union, we put a bunch of chancellors and losers in charge of the country. We've had a series of disastrous prime ministers from both parties, and I think this is a real problem. Britain hasn't taken full advantage of Brexit. When I was campaigning for Britain to leave the European Union, we very consciously wanted Britain to reduce regulation. Being in Europe means you're heavily regulated. We've not repealed the regulations on the development of new medicines. We've not removed many of the regulations on the use of data on the internet online. Now, to be fair, Britain hasn't adopted a lot of the new European regulations, which is one of the reasons, for example, why Facebook recently announced that they would be testing AI in Britain, not in Europe. But Britain hasn't taken full advantage of leaving the European Union. Once you reclaim self-government, you've got to figure out how to govern yourself. Britain hasn't yet done that. We've still had a succession of disastrous governments, but that doesn't mean Brexit's a bad thing. Brexit, I think, needs a transformation in the way that.
Let me ask you a question. Do you know sometimes when you leave a company, like when I left the company and I started my own company, there was a unified desire to see me fail miserably, because if I failed, others wouldn't be inspired to replicate what I did, right? So lawsuits, losing contracts, defamation of character, that lasted about 7 years, and it was nasty. Doing whatever they can to deplete my savings constantly. Now, eventually, we succeeded, we overcame, and we sold the company for a few $100 million. It was a beautiful exit. It was fantastic. And now it's one of the biggest companies in the insurance industry nationwide, okay? And it's been fantastic. However, you guys leave. there's a lot of people that can't let you win.
Of course.
There's a lot of people that have to do whatever they can to show data and statistics and send the wrong type of migrants to your country to see a massive fall taking place. How much of what's happened to UK the last 4 years do you think is some of the puppet masters behind closed doors driving certain types of people to your country to have it lose its sizzle to say, see what happens when you, how much of it you think is happening?
You're very accurate when you put your finger on it. The European elite want to punish Britain. Britain cannot be allowed to be a success or seen to be a success by the populations that remain in the EU, because if that happens, the Scandinavians, the Hungarians, they're going to want this, the Poles, they're going to want the same thing. They're going to want to break away from. You're
flirting with conspiracy here. Don't flirt with conspiracy.
It's not a conspiracy.
I don't want you to do that.
They say it on television. I mean, there was a man called Michel Barnier who was the chief negotiator. And he basically said that we're going to negotiate a trade relationship with Britain that will punish Britain, even if it harms us in Europe. So, I mean, it's not.
I believe that.
They've said this out loud. But, you know, if you mustn't just blame European governments. A lot of the failure was the British Prime Minister, called Theresa May, immediately after Brexit. She came in and she made these extraordinary concessions unnecessarily. She was a believer in Britain staying in the European Union. Why on earth they allowed her to be Prime Minister in charge of negotiating with Europe, even though she didn't believe in Brexit, I do not know. But she managed to negotiate a whole series of agreements that have basically given us a suboptimal Brexit. But, you know, it can be fixed, and I think it will be fixed.
Liz Truss, do you remember Liz Truss's whole text, it's done, you know, and with Blinken, that whole exchange that happened during the Nord Stream pipeline, et cetera, et cetera. One, what's your opinion on Liz Truss, and what's your opinion on that story?
I've known Liz for 20 years. She's a great person, but I think she was out of her depth. I don't think she was suited to be Prime Minister. I agree with her on many things, but the ideas are great. The execution and implementation were terrible. I'm not sure what you meant by the Nord Stream. Was this
oh, you don't remember the story?
Vaguely.
So where, Rob, if you can, I don't know if you remember when the whole thing, everybody was talking about this, where there was claims, Russian Foreign Minister spokesman urged that the former UK Prime Minister to explain her message allegedly sent to U.S. Secretary of State right after the accident on Nord Stream gas pipeline at Baltic Sea. Honestly, I don't care who and how got this information. I'm interested in London's response to the following question. Did Britain's Prime Minister Liz Truss send a message to U.S. Secretary of Anthony Blinken right after the explosion at Nord Stream gas pipeline with the words, "It's done"? Do you remember this on Telegram or no?
No.
You don't remember any of this?
No.
Okay.
I'm not on Telegram.
Well, this was a big story at the time that everybody was talking about when this took place, and there was a lot of controversy behind it when it happened. But if you don't know anything about it.
But I mean, no conspiracy theorist, no disrespect, but no serious conspiracy is going to involve someone who managed to remain Prime Minister for a mere 40 days. I mean, you know.
No, but it's just weird for her to send a message to somebody on Telegram saying it's done. Blinken or something. Yeah, that's the only thing. The timing of it was.
How do we know that she said that?
Rob, can you pull up what the exchange was with this?
And how do we know she wasn't talking about, I don't know.
No, we don't know that. No,
ordering
that's none of us know that. I'm just asking you to see what your opinion was. I don't even think in my opinion, who was behind the Nord Stream, it's done, was a complete different story. My opinion is a complete different place. I just thought you have a relationship with Liz if you knew anything about the story.
Yeah, I mean, I know Liz and she's a nice person, but the idea that she would be capable of remaining in office for more than 2 months is absurd. The idea you would therefore involve her.
Why do you think she was only in office for 2 months?
I don't think she was up to it.
You don't think she was up to it?
Yeah. I mean, being in
how does she
job,
get nominated? How does she become one?
A member of parliament or a minister?
No, minister.
I think in Britain you've had a lot of you've got a political system in Britain that basically filters out people who have competence and character. It rewards people who are obsequious and suck up to the boss. And I think this means that you end up with people who hide their beliefs until they get to the top, but at no stage have ever actually learned how to implement them. which is why you end up with politicians who sometimes say things that you agree with, but never actually seem to make them happen. It's not just something that happens in Britain. I think you see some of this in America. People vote Conservative, but don't seem to get administrators that tackle the bureaucrats who impose the woke agenda in their children's classroom. Why not? Well, because they're not good at...
Who would she be a comparable in the States?
Dan Quayle.
Dan Quayle.
Look the part, act the part. Don't put him anywhere near power.
Wow. So you obviously think very highly of her when it comes onto politics. Very respectful right there.
Hi, everyone. I'm Douglas Carswell. You can join me on Minect, where you can ask me any question you want. Why I believe in American exceptionism. What made me leave Brexit Britain and come to Mississippi, the greatest state, I think, in America. You can ask me any question you want, and I'll answer it directly. Look forward to hearing from you.
So if you like this clip and you want to watch another one, click right here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click right here.